What we will do in this module is create a new company file using the Easy Step interview in QuickBooks. Because the Easy Setup interview takes some time to go through, I've broken this instruction into two parts. Part 1 will go over creating the actual company file, while Part 2, which follows right after this section, goes over additional interview setup questions we need to go through. Now in the previous module, I introduced the way in which you should follow along using the Items, Fittings, and Supply Limited instruction QuickBooks sample file that's been provided. For this module, however, this instruction file is actually the end product of what we'll be setting up in this module. You can do so by just following along with what you see on the screen, and at the end, you can compare what you have with the Items, Fittings, and Supply Unlimited instruction QuickBooks sample file provided. Now let's get started with the Easy Setup interview. First, we'll click the button that says Create a New Company File. And you'll see three options here. One says Express Start. This option will ask you a few questions and then it will set up your company file, but you'll still have a lot more to do, and if you don't have any direction and know what to do, you'll be kind of lost here. So we're not going to select this one. The other option is to create a new company from an existing file. So if you already have a company file created and you want to take the preferences, sales tax items, memorized reports, and chart of accounts and put them into a brand new file, this option would be ideal. However, we're starting from scratch, so we're going to select Detailed Start. Now you'll notice on the first screen here that you really only have to input two things. That is the company name and the province, indicated by the asterisks. However, you'll want to fill out as much of this as possible because this is where it's going to pull information onto your correspondence. So if you're going to send out invoices, for example, you'll want your street address, city, and postal code filled out. Let me go ahead and put in a company name here, and we're just going to call it Items, Fittings, and Supply Limited. For our scenario, this company sells pipes and fittings for construction clients in the Greater Toronto Area. You'll notice that as soon as I put in the company name, it copied it into the legal name field. You really don't need to change it unless the legal name happens to be different. Now we'll put in the street address. Let's say it's 2810 Main Street. The city being Toronto. We'll choose our province as Ontario. Our postal code will be M4C4Y4. You can also go ahead and put in your phone number and fax number if you want. Since I'll be demonstrating invoice forms later, let's put these in. So here's my phone number. And here's my fax number. You would want to have your email address and your website on any correspondence that you may want to send out, so I'll put these in as well. So here's my email address. And here's my website. The good thing is that none of these fields we are entering are set in stone. You do have the ability to come back into the Easy Step interview and edit anything you've entered at this point. When we click Next, it now asks us to select our industry. When you look down the list, you'll see a whole bunch of different industries pre-populated for you, like we have accounting and bookkeeping, advertising, auto sales, etc. If you're unsure about which industry to pick, you can scroll to the bottom and select either general product-based business or general service-based business. The reason why QuickBooks asks for an industry is because it wants to assist you in setting up a pre-populated chart of accounts reflective of the type of accounts you would use in that business. We'll end up seeing this chart of accounts shortly. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to select generic product-based business, and I'll click Next. We are now asked how our company is organized. So you need to assess, is the business a sole proprietorship or unincorporated entity? If so, the financial statements generated from QuickBooks will likely be used for the sole proprietor's personal tax return, also known as a T1 return in Canada. Or perhaps the business is unincorporated, but it is owned by more than one owner, and each of the partners reports their income on their personal T1 returns. If so, you would select the second option. For most of the companies you will likely work on in QuickBooks throughout your career, they will be incorporated entities, which need to file a T2 corporate tax return every year. If this applies to the business you're working on, you would select the third option. If you are doing the books for a non-for-profit or charity, you would select either of these options. And lastly, you have the option to select Other or None. What this means is that QuickBooks will not assign any tax forms to your company. If you select any of the other options above, QuickBooks will allow you to assign your accounts to tax lines that exist on the tax return applicable to your selection, which further allows exporting balances directly into tax software. Since incorporated entities are the most common, as I said earlier, let's select Corporation for this demonstration. And let's select Next. Now we have to pick the first month of our fiscal year. This will default to January. If your first month of the fiscal year is not January, you can select the appropriate month from the drop-down. For this demonstration, Adams Fittings and Supply has a fiscal year that begins in January. So I'm going to hit Next. Now it asks us for an administrator password. If you don't end up setting an administrator password, what will happen is that anyone who gets a copy of your QuickBooks file can go in and essentially get complete access to everything that is inside your file. Of course, it is highly recommended that you do set up a password in order to maintain the security of your company's confidential data. Once a password is set up and you log out of the file and then log back in, you will be prompted to enter the username, which in this case would be admin, and the password that you specified. For this demonstration, however, I will not assign a password to the file. Now it asks us to create your company file. Let's select Next. And you'll notice how that it is prompting us to save our QuickBooks file using the company name we assigned at the beginning of this section. However, you don't need to stick with this name, and you can use whatever name you like. As far as choosing a save location, I would recommend you save the file in its own folder, which is something that I discussed in the first section of this module. The actual folder should be saved somewhere where you can easily find it if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and hit Save at the bottom. And now it's actually creating your new company file. Please now watch part 2 as we continue to work through the Easy Step interview process. This section is a continuation of the Easy Step interview, which I was demonstrating in the previous section. So if you did not watch a previous section titled Using the Easy Step Interview Part 1, I highly recommend you do so before watching this one. At this point now, our company file has now been created, and we still have some more questions that the Easy Step interview is going to ask us. These questions relate more to the customization of our file. If we hit Next,
First, it asks us what we sell, whether it be products, services, or both products and services. For this demonstration, I will select the third option, and I'm going to click Next. It now asks us if we sell our products online. As QuickBooks disclaims here, this is solely for the purpose of displaying information about services that can help you sell products on the web. Since we really don't care so much about that feature for the purposes of this course, I'm going to select that we don't sell online, even if we may actually do. And I'm going to click Next. Now it asks us if we charge sales tax. For most for-profit entities you will work on, the answer to this will usually be yes. As we know in Canada, sales tax is in the form of HST, GST, PST, or QST if you're registered in Quebec. For sales tax filing purposes, we will input our sales tax number, but we do not have to input our QST number for this company. So let's input our number. In this case, it is all nines with 9 digits. And it ends in RT0001. Now, if we click Next, QuickBooks will actually warn you saying that the business number is invalid if it actually is. So it's a nice accuracy control that they built into the program. For this to be valid, I'll go ahead and modify the number I'm using to a valid number. So I'm going to click Go Back, and I'll change the last number to an 8. And click Next. Now it asks us if we like to create estimates in QuickBooks. So, for example, in our business, we may have a large contractor come to us who's interested in buying a large quantity of pipes needed for a big construction project going on in the city. The contractor would first likely ask us for a quote or estimate on those costs to buy the bulk of pipes. So in this case, you would want this feature turned on. I'm going to say yes and click Next. It now asks us if we want to enable the sales order feature in QuickBooks. So to clarify, sales orders are not the same as invoices, as the products have not been sold yet, only ordered. It is more useful for inventory management purposes for a business that primarily sells goods, as it will adjust inventory levels based on the amount being ordered. I will further demonstrate the use of sales orders in another module, but for now I will select yes to this feature and click Next. Now it asks us about using statements in QuickBooks. So these would be statements you would send out to customers which specify the list of unpaid invoices as of a certain date, usually at the end of the month. It's useful for managing receivables as it reminds customers they owe you money. Now, it's not a requirement, but a lot of businesses do send out statements, especially ones that deal with a high number of transactions, like our business that sells construction materials. For our demonstration, we will select yes to this feature as well, and click Next. Next, we are asked about if we want to use progress invoicing. Progress invoicing is mainly used by companies that bill for large projects that are performed in phases or milestones over a period of time. Normally, these projects would get billed as each of these phases is completed. Since we are in the business of selling industrial pipes, we don't undergo big projects like this, and the need for progress invoicing will not apply to us. So I will select No for this feature and click Next. Next, it asks us if we want to manage the bills we owe to our vendors. So basically, what it means by managing bills is that it will allow you to run reports showing who you owe money to, what bills are overdue, how old these bills are, and providing reminders when bills become due. For any business that does not deal on a cash basis, and what I mean is that they actually get credit terms with their vendors, like allowing you to pay in 15 or 30 days or whatever, which arises in accounts payable balances, you should definitely take advantage of this feature in QuickBooks. So I will select yes and click Next. Next, we are asked if we want to print checks. So in QuickBooks, you actually have the ability to print checks as they are being created, which can be a big time saver for you instead of manually writing these out. So the program has the ability to recognize your printer settings and print the appropriate fields on your blank checks when you put them through your printer. For our demonstration, I will select that we are printing checks. And I'm going to click Next. Now we are asked about tracking inventory in QuickBooks. As I will show in a later module, you do have the ability to record and track your quantity of inventory, whether it be actual products you are selling or quantity of items used directly in your service business. I'm actually a bit surprised that QuickBooks asks us this, since we were previously asked if we want to use the sales ordering feature, which adjusts our inventory levels for us. So for our company, given that we sell actual products, being pipes and fittings, it would be beneficial for us to track these. So I will say yes to this option. And we're going to click Next. Next, we are asked if we accept credit cards. So QuickBooks can actually allow you to process payments from your customers by entering their debit or credit card information using the Merchant Services interface that exists directly in the program. However, I find that in practice, this feature is rarely used, as most businesses use another third-party merchant provider to process these transactions. For our demonstration, I will select No for this option and click Next. Now it asks us about tracking time in QuickBooks. So there are two ways in which you may want to use this feature. The first way is, let's say you're in a business where you actually invoice your customers by the time you spend either speaking to them on the phone or doing a project or work for them. You could actually turn on the timer in QuickBooks and record that time, and then you can turn around and invoice your customer for that time. The other way you could track time would be for job costing purposes. So you may want to use this feature to track the time that your employees spend working on a particular project, and use this data to determine how much of your overhead costs should be allocated to that project. For this demonstration, I will turn on this feature and click Next. Now it's asking us if we have employees. Since payroll is a common function used by companies that run QuickBooks, I've prepared a separate module covering this. So for us to use payroll functions in QuickBooks, I will select Yes, and I'll click Next. We are now asked if we want to track multiple currencies in QuickBooks. So if your company undergoes transactions outside of Canada, whether it be buying goods or services or selling goods or services, you will want to enable this feature. However, it's very important to note, and QuickBooks even mentions it here, once you enable this function, you cannot disable it. The good thing though is that if we discover later that we need to use this feature, we can always go back to company settings and turn it on. To be on the safe side for now, I will select No for this feature and hit Next. Now we're getting to the last parts of the Easy Step interview, as you can see by the progress bar over here. We're going to click Next. And now it will ask you to select a start date to start tracking your finances. Now, you have two choices here. You can either start from the beginning of your fiscal year, or you can choose any specific date you'd like. Ultimately, the date you choose should be the date of your earliest transaction that needs to be recorded in your company's books. For this demonstration, I will pick January 1st, 2019. And I'll click Next. QuickBooks has now populated a list of commonly used accounts for us to choose that would be used in the industry that we selected in Part 1 of the Easy Step interview demonstration. So if you recall, we had selected our industry to be general product-based business, and we should expect to see accounts related to sales, purchases, like on top here, shipping costs, along with typical selling and admin expenses like down here, plus a few capital asset accounts, which would be over here. As we look through the list, it appears that QuickBooks did a good job at selecting these for us. It also threw in other potentially applicable accounts for us to select, like business licenses and permits. Now, in case you believe that there is another account that should be added to our chart of accounts that's not appearing on this list at all, no reason to be alarmed. I will show you in the upcoming module how you can add an account in your chart of accounts later on. For now, I will take the list that QuickBooks has recommended and click Next. So congratulations! We are now done the easy step interview process. One important thing I'd like to note is that none of these selections we put in the easy step process is set in stone. They can be modified, which is something that I will discuss when I go over selecting QuickBooks preferences in Module 3. If we now go to Setup, and move the screen over a bit, before I discuss this screen, I should note that if you are using the QuickBooks Desktop Accountant edition, you may be prompted to set the external accountant user functions. For this demonstration, we are doing the actual bookkeeping and not performing adjusting entries for a client, so I would hit no on this prompt if it appeared. So on this screen, we're asked about several things we want to add, like our customers, inventory items, and bank accounts. We will do each of these in separate modules, so for now, let's hit Start Working at the bottom. We're going to close this pop-up window over here. And now we're at our fantastic home screen, which will be our starting point for the next section, which I will go over how to get around in QuickBooks.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To see more QuickBooks Canada videos from Simon Says It, click over there. And click over there to upgrade to the full QuickBooks Canada course.